Hello and a warm welcome to the 11th edition of our Experts Dispatch segment. I'm Saman Rizwan, working as a research assistant at the Center for Strategic and Contemporary Research, Islamabad. We're a policy research institute and have been doing these video sessions on a regular basis in which we conduct brief interviews of policymakers and academicians, both domestically and internationally. So today's session primarily centers around Afghanistan as the US withdraws its troops from the country while the socio-political landscape of Afghanistan hangs in the balance. And we are also aware that the Taliban's influence in the post-US Afghanistan will grow to the detriment of Afghan society and the region at large. Whether the group takes power militarily or joins the government via peace deal, it is important to discuss the rising situation as it will have a lasting impact on the actors involved. Now, to discuss these developments, we're delighted to have Abdul Basit with us, research fellow at International Center for Political Violence and Terrorism Research of the S. Rajaratnam School of International Studies, Singapore. Basit specializes in issues of politics, violence, religious extremism, terrorism, and security in South Asia. He has co-authored a book entitled Dynamics of Taliban Insurgency in FATA. Apart from that, he writes extensively in reputed academic journals, and his commentaries have been published in the National Interest, Al Jazeera, and South China Morning Post, among others. Basit, it is great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
So the first question is more from a generalized perspective. So do you think there is any possibility of China, Pakistan, and India forming a collaborative framework in Afghanistan in the near future?
Well, it totally depends on how things pan out at multiple levels within Afghanistan, outside of Afghanistan, between Pakistan and India, between China and India, between US and China for this trilateral arrangement to work. For now, I don't see this happening because China and India have an ongoing border dispute. India and Pakistan, well, they have started a back channel and they're trying to normalize, but things haven't reached that point. Yes, India has opened a back channel which they have officially recognized with the Taliban, but for that is in early incipient stages. Things in Afghanistan are in a flux itself as the US is withdrawing. So the deadline given is September of this year. And then the peace process, which was moved from Qatar to Ankara, I think it hasn't taken off as yet. So I think that is, in my opinion, the best platform to reach any settlement. But on Afghanistan, I think there is going to be a strategic competition for space, for influence, and for power jockeying between India and Pakistan, China combined. So we have to see the caveat here is that India is talking to the Taliban. So that opens up the possibility, a distant possibility, which as of now I don't foresee, but in the future I don't rule out that there is that slight opening that if India is talking to them, at least that gives you the bend of their thinking process, that rather than starting a proxy war, if they're not pushed into that, they would like to come to the negotiation table, given that they are provided a chair there. So I think if Pakistan opens up to that idea, which as of now they haven't, I mean, Pakistan has ruled out, if you look at various media leaks by Pakistani official quarters, their categorical stance is that India has no role as far as the peace process is concerned. Post-peace process, whoever comes to power, whether the Taliban or anyone else for that matter, And if India reaches out to them, that is going to be a bilateral matter between two sovereign nations. But Pakistan doesn't see any role for India in the peace process. So if that is not there, and if India is still talking to the Taliban, so I'm really not sure how is this going to work. But maybe in later, as Pakistan normalizes with India, it may revisit its own position. So things, as you said quite rightly, are in a flux. So I think everyone is playing a hedging game. Everyone is on the wait and see policy, and see how things unfold from here on.
That's a pretty valid observation, though. When talking about political settlement in Afghanistan, Basit, do you see any prospect of the Afghan government negotiating a settlement with the Taliban, sort of similar to how it reached an agreement with Hizb Islami in 2017?
You see, well, there is, the precedence is there. So you got a template. But I would rather call it a false equivalence or a false parallel. And let me qualify why I'm saying this. Look, Hizb Islami of Gulbuddin Hikmat Yar, in my opinion, is a spent force. Has no say in the power equation. So for him, it was more about, in my opinion, again, and I could be wrong here, for his own survival. So he cut a deal with Kabul and got a place for himself within the setup to survive. He even, I think, ran for the presidential elections, but was nowhere in the race. The main dominant player are the Afghan Taliban, various factions, and then you have the Ghani administration, which is the Kabul administration. So Hizb Islami cut a deal with Kabul from a position of weakness. Taliban, on the contrary, are on the ascendants. So they are dominating the negotiation landscape. And of course, then they are talking, if they will talk, from a power of position. So that's the fundamental difference there. So that template I don't see is going to work. Now, coming to this, the primarily the debate here is one of the republic versus the Islamic Emirate, which is the self-styled theocratic model of the Afghan Taliban, which they want to have in Afghanistan. They kind of couch their words. They don't like to use the moniker of Islamic Emirate because international community has a lot of reservation and the memories attached to the Islamic Emirate, synonymous to the 1996 to 2001 rule, oppressive rule. So they have stopped using the moniker. What they use is an Islamic Sharia government. But where it gets really murky and goes into the gray area is they don't like to specify or, in specifics mention the details of what is this model about. There is no document about it. There is no white paper about it. For instance, we do not know, while they say they will give rights to women, there is no document which actually details what do they mean by it. Same goes for foreign policy, economy, governance. What is their model? There is no document about it. And they like to shy away from sharing details. All they do is they kind of keep it in the vague area. And then, there is a lot of reservation about it. Is this conversation between Kabul and the Taliban is going anywhere? The single most important factor which would have shaped Afghan Taliban's behaviors towards peace was the US and NATO presence. Had that withdrawal been conditioned with reaching a political settlement with the Afghan Taliban, I think then a deal was possible. But the very fact that they were sitting on the table was to make sure that America and NATO leaves. Now, the fact that America and NATO have decided to withdraw irrespective of any outcome of the peace deal between Kabul and Afghan Taliban have no incentive in talking to Kabul. So I think the fundamental factor that would have shaped that behavior has been taken out of the equation. And I think that's a mistake. So Afghan Taliban are playing hardball, and I don't see as of now they will return to the peace talks anytime soon. Ankara was the place. Recently, you have seen that when Turkey signaled that they are ready to take over the role of providing security to Kabul, Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul, Taliban just issued a warning, stay away. We don't want any foreign force on our land. So that pretty much, undermines the neutrality of Turkey as an arbiter or negotiator between Kabul and Afghanistan. And because of that, I think there will be a lot of mistrust now between Taliban and Turkey. So I don't see Taliban returning to peace talks anytime soon. They would rather wait out the US until September and then start changing their military campaign from hit and run and weakening to government to taking over the districts and then maybe cities. At least they will try that. Yeah.
I think the world was aware of the fact that a hasty US withdrawal will have far reaching implications. And now I think we're going to see it unfold. Okay, Bas.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead, please.
since you have mentioned the Taliban are in ascendance and they are on a position of power, the one with the militant wing, of course, do you think that there's any kind of reconciliation possible between Taliban and the Afghan government, similar to the Iraqi Kurdistan model or the Palestinian Authority model, that the group may be given autonomy in areas under their control provided by the central government?
Look, so a de facto bifurcation of Afghanistan already exists. That is the Taliban governed versus the non-Taliban governed territory, or rural and urban Afghanistan. Urban Afghanistan is under the control of the Ghani administration. Rural Afghanistan generally is under the Taliban rule. And then Taliban are continuously increasing their territorial gains and challenging the authority of the Ghani administration. Now, the center of gravity of the future war lies in the urban landscape of Afghanistan. That is where the war would be fought. As long as Kabul remains within the hold of the Ghani administration, they have the government in Afghanistan, irrespective of how much land the Taliban occupy. So that's the center of gravity there. So it's already there in a way, and certain areas there is joint governance. For instance, dispensaries or health centers or schools in Taliban controlled territories are the domain of the government. Now, the government then provides the funding, yet they are run under the Taliban control. So Taliban would take fund from the government who are provided by the international community and then, perhaps disperse the salaries, and this is how it continues. That arrangement, as strange as it sounds, exists. Now, could there be an arrangement equivalent to that of Iraq or what we see in Palestine? Depends on how long the international community is ready to provide assistance, equipment, and training to the Ghani administration. Is there an appetite? If you look at the NATO countries, I believe if you look at the body language, they're done with Afghanistan. They're exhausted. The political will is not there. Even for the US, it's not there. Well, it's about it because if they abandon Afghanistan, that involves reputational costs, right? So they're not gonna, go down that path. But how long? Najibullah survived. Dr. Najibullah survived about 3 years, but former Soviet Russia was funding him to make sure that their own withdrawal is orderly and their own interests are served And once that was done, they just abandoned him. And you saw what happened to Najibullah. His dead body was hanging, you know, by a cannon of a tank, I guess. Very sad end to him. But um, if this deadlock continues, which we are talking about, which you refer to as a model of Kurds and Iraqis or Palestinian Authority and Hamas, um, can Afghanistan, given its ground situation, afford that? Look, now Hamas and the Kurds are political actors. Hamas transformed into a political actor which has a militant wing. Taliban are out and out an insurgent and a guerrilla and a militant outfit. They have a political office in Qatar and they are hard negotiators. Are they savvy politicians as well? I have my doubts about it. They are not ready for a political life. And Afghanistan is not ready to accept Taliban style of politics as well. There are a lot of reservations about it, right? So if you have the Taliban trying to take over Kabul and the rest of Afghanistan, and you have Kabul being supported by the international community, and the current deadlock, the strategic stalemate which is currently there, which means that Taliban are tactically ascendant, but not strong enough to impose a military solution over Kabul, and Kabul is weak, but not weak enough to lose to the Taliban. And if this cycle of violence perpetuates or self-perpetuates, then you have spoilers in the shadows, on the sidelines, on the margins, the likes of Al-Qaeda, Daesh, they could become strong. And in my opinion, again, it's my opinion, I could be wrong, Afghanistan might go down the Syria path, where Assad versus the non-Assad Sunni rebels have a deadlock. And what you see as a result of that deadlock and no negotiation is Al-Qaeda emerging at one side and Islamic State emerging on the other side. So you have these two actors, and then you have these jihadis actors as spoilers coming in. So the spoilers would benefit from the continued deadlock of the Afghan war. So how long the international community actually supports Kabul, let's wait and see. How optimistic is international community about the capability of the Afghan forces to hold fort in Kabul? I'm not very optimistic about it, but at the same time, I want to add this last caveat. Taliban maximum operational strength, numerical strength is 100,000. The UN report says it's somewhere between 68,000 to 100,000. Now, if you 100,000 people who are not a regular army, they are an insurgent and a guerrilla group. So they specialize in hit and run operations. They use terrorism as well. Afghanistan has 34 provinces. 100,000 people are not enough to take a province and then hold it. So if they really stretch themselves to take these provinces, if they take one and hold it, move to another, they will be stretching. So if they bring the reinforcement to the next one, the previous province will be retaken. So what you have as a result of that is a self-perpetuating violence. So would the Taliban really push it? Have they learned their lessons or not? I'm not sure. But both parties are in a stalemate right now. And I don't think so that while everyone keeps talking about, Taliban taking over Afghanistan, it's not going to be a walk in the park for them. It's going to be difficult. Afghanistan has changed, and Taliban will find it difficult to take over Kabul. Yeah.
Point well taken. Basit, when you talked about, so you said that Afghan Taliban particularly is a militant organization, right, with no streams of political coming into the political fold. But what if they do surprise the world and diverge from their traditional disruptive methods and focus more on becoming actual part of the mainstream political fabric of the country? Then how do you see the situation?
Taliban surprising everybody. I really wish, and I hope you're right. And I wish against this, and I also pray with you this happens. Uh, but I mean, if wishes were wishes were horses, beggars would fly. But we got to look at the evidence. Uh, evidence on evidence really doesn't. I mean, I have no reason to believe that Taliban are going. Look, what is their dilemma? What is Taliban's dilemma? Why can't they do it? Look, so the peacemakers within, this is the paradox, and this might surprise you. Look, the peacemakers within the Taliban, the moderates are large in number. The likes of Mullah Abdul Ghani brother, who would say, let's make peace, let's part ways with Al Qaeda, let's work with the international community, let's, do politics, let's leave this life of guns and bombs. Their clout is very small. Mullah Abdul Ghani brother is not even in Afghanistan. He sits in Qatar. Prior to that, for 10 years, he was in prison. The top shura of the Taliban which takes decision is not in Afghanistan. Most of them are not. So the mid-level commander who is dying out in the battlefield, he is not going to settle for anything less than a military victory. So those who want to make peace are large in number. They are small in clout. Those who are hardliners, their clout is big. So if the Quetta Shura, let's say, of Akhundzada, Mullah Haibatullah Akhundzada and the Qatar office, they really push it. So the hardliners versus the moderates, the Taliban movement might split. So it is a structural compulsion on the Taliban to continue fighting for their organizational coherence. And from that, the political model is going to emerge, whatever that model is. I'm not quite privy to that because they will evolve. Of course, you're right, Taliban are evolving. Some of them have evolved. If you read Mullah Abdul Zaif's book, My Life with the Taliban, there are quite bold admissions that they made a lot of mistakes. They couldn't govern Afghanistan. So they have learned. But the new generation of the Taliban, called as the Neo-Taliban, which are ambitious, enthusiastic, action-driven, they think they are winning the war. They believe they have defeated another superpower of the day in Afghanistan. Are they going to settle for less than a military victory, a jihadi victory? I don't think so. So they have trouble within the organization as well, which compels them for their unity to continue fighting. I wish they surprised the world pleasantly. I don't think there are any pleasant surprises as far as the Taliban are concerned. They are pretty predictable in very violent ways.
Right. So Basit, if violence forms a core structure of the Taliban, then why wasn't the US successful? For 2 decades, it remained in Afghanistan. Why wasn't the US successful in dismantling the group or hitting at its organizational capacity? It sort of hints that the civil war will still will erupt and it will continue for a long time, and Afghanistan will still be, another chaotic country, similar to how the history has been there. So how do you see that?
Look, the global war on terror was a war against terror. Now, terrorism is a phenomenon. How do you wage a war against a phenomena or an idea? Yeah. Actually, I mean, they tried. They intervened in 2001. January 2003, United States said we are invading Iraq, and the entire focus shifted to Iraq. Afghanistan, they thought they have decimated the Taliban. Taliban wanted a chair during the Bonn process in Germany. They actually, I think, wanted to surrender. At that time, the Bush administration, which was the Republican administration, said, "Oh, we don't talk to the United States of America doesn't talk to the terrorists. And we have reduced the Taliban to a ragtag militia, ragtag tribal militia. United States, to begin with, as bold as and provocative as this statement may sound, wasn't serious when it comes to Afghanistan. Wasn't serious until 2007-8, I tell you. 2005-6 is when they started waking up to the reality, oh, Taliban are on the rebound. 7, 8, 9 is when they said, oh, the Taliban are back. And this is when the administration changed from Bush after his 2 terms to Obama. Now, Obama's mantra, for lack of a better term here, for Afghanistan was not enough boots on the ground. So he went for a troop surge, and the combined number of NATO and US troops in Afghanistan was 150,000, round about that figure. And they said, like, let's change the momentum of the battlefield in our favor. And then from after pushing the Taliban and from the position of strength, start negotiating with them. Let's change the momentum. And initially they were successful at the tactical level. Now, why US, failed or did not succeed in dismantling and all? Because they did not have a consistent policy. 2009, Obama said, go for a troop surge. 2010, they said, you know what? Hamid Karzai and his brothers are corrupt. They are involved in, in embezzling the money and funds. The funds haven't been spent rightly. Had those funds been spent the judicious way, the Afghan society by now would have transformed. So accountability is a problem. 2011, they said, no, you know what? Drugs and poppies are the main issue. They fuel the insurgency. So let's go for drug eradication. 2012, they had a different idea. 2013, Obama was talking to General Kiani, let's talk to the Taliban. He said, okay, fine. And still this idea was nascent. 2014, Obama says, oh, you know what? We are going to leave Afghanistan. While announcing that they are going to leave Afghanistan, come 2015, they don't leave Afghanistan. And then you have Trump coming in, 2016 as a bad war, electoral promise. Say, we are going to get out of Afghanistan. Once he takes power, and he does the exact opposite of that. My point is pretty simple. When you are changing your policy every year, how do you expect results? You don't even run a restaurant like this. This is a war. This is the so-called war on terror. The war on terror was a rolling ball gathering no mass at all. There was no consistency whatsoever, no seriousness, no thought process going into what the America was doing in Afghanistan. A lot of NATO countries said United States of America is confused. So I think if that answers your question, why couldn't they, just simply break the organizational structure of the Afghan Taliban? You spread the war to Pakistan, you want to do that, let's say the sanctuaries were in Pakistan. You spread the Afghan war to Pakistan and it's a whole lot chaos. It doesn't solve the problem, it only complicates it. So I think so US had its own limitations. US wasn't very consistent. I would even say not serious. They only got serious now, but they only got serious because it got too big for them. Earlier there was hubris that, we can fix it. When they couldn't fix it, then they kept wondering what to do. They kept on searching for the answers for a few years until they realized, what, we can't do it. And then, the burden of history tells you that every empire which intervened in Afghanistan failed. The same lesson is true for the United States of America. Just one thing I want to mention. 3 things are common in the Vietnam War, the Russia-Afghan War, and the War on Terror. In all 3 wars, they couldn't sell the invasion to the local people. Invasions were unpopular. Number two, the local governments they prop up, they did not have roots in people and they could not deliver. They were bad governors. Number three, in all three instances, Russia as well as America in Vietnam and Afghanistan failed to stop the intervention or interference of the neighboring countries into Vietnam and Afghanistan. So the history in a way has repeated itself. Hence, the result is they couldn't, Afghan Taliban, you can call them as the beneficiaries of these inconsistent policies. Because if the United States of America had the Omega watch, they had the time on their side.
Yeah, very thorough and descriptive answer from your end. Basit, now coming to Islamic State and Al-Qaeda, do you think they're going to re-emerge and find more space in Afghanistan after the US exit?
I think it totally depends on how the situation evolves. If there is a civil war and the civil war prolongs, both countries struggle, both sides, struggle to reach a conclusion, or one clear victor of the war doesn't emerge, which I don't think so is likely to emerge, then the deadlock, as I told you, the Syria situation, Assad versus the Sunni rebels, that is where on the margins these jihadist spoilers became forced to reckon with, or big actors. If that happens, then I believe they will benefit, but will they become the kind of giants that Al-Nusra Front and Daesh became in Syria? I don't think so, but they will benefit from it. It's already happening. If you look at the continuous attacks on the Hazara community in Afghanistan, what actually Daesh is doing while Taliban and Kabul are busy fighting each other, unable to provide security to that hapless community, Daesh is trying to stoke the sectarian fault line. As a matter of fact, they are provoking the Hazara community to defend themselves, bring up the so-called Fatimiyun brigade, which went to fight in Syria and is Iran funded. So they want to stoke that sectarian fault line, and that sectarian fault line is then going to benefit them. It's pretty much what Zarqawi, in a different way, again, it's a false equivalence, but nonetheless, to make the point, this is what Zarqawi was doing in Iraq. When Al-Qaeda in Iraq failed because the Sahaba movement of the tribal Sunnis of Iraq, they pushed out Al-Qaeda. Zarqawi went for hitting the Shias, and that provoked the Sunni-Shia conflict. And as a result of that conflict, the Sunnis who defeated Al-Qaeda in Iraq actually, then started supporting them. So in this case, Islamic State is trying to, trigger the sectarian fault line to benefit from it. So I think this is going to be their strategy in a different way, but whether they succeed in it or not, I think we'll have to wait and see. Yeah. Al-Qaeda, I think the Al-Qaeda Taliban nexus is very strong. They are still under the protection of the Taliban. I think for Al-Qaeda, they will benefit from this because they will continue to keep their sanctuaries, and the US counter-terrorism pressure will be eliminated. So that will allow them to, expand a bit. But is Al-Qaeda going to become the Al-Qaeda which carried out the 9/11 attack? I don't think so. That is not going to happen. That will not happen.
Very interesting point, Basit. Basit, just a last question, which is related to Pakistan. We've seen that for long, Pakistan has been insisting that the Afghan Taliban and the Taliban in Pakistan be treated differently. And lately, we've seen the manifestation of this duality from the international community as well. Doha Accords and prolonged negotiations between the United States and Afghan Taliban, it appears that the world now sees the Afghan Taliban not as a militant entity, but rather as a legitimate political entity with whom negotiations continue to occur. Now, in this context, has the world accepted the discourse of duality propagated by Pakistan? I'm referring to the good versus bad Taliban discourse that Pakistan held on for so long.
Let me use my words now. Look, Hamas was a terrorist organization, right? Prior to that, Hezbollah was a terrorist organization. Nelson Mandela's African National Congress uh, was called a terrorist organization. Taliban have earned that seat on the table. Violence is the reason. As unfortunate as it may sound, that's how history flows. Is it Pakistan's discourse of duality? I would put it a different way. Why the US came to Afghanistan in the first place? If you try to simplify the matters and boil it down to one point, for Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden. So Pakistan from the get-go was telling the Americans, let's focus on that. We'll help you arrest, dismantle Al-Qaeda, and then you have the Taliban. These are Islamists who fight, they believe they are jihadists, and there should be some accommodation for them. The US confused the two and kept on confusing until they reached this conclusion, which you refer to as the discourse of duality, that it was better to keep your goals, well defined, and then put in the means to achieve them. US continuously confused the two, and they thought, while they could just defeat all the jihadists in this part of the world. That hasn't happened. So Taliban now have a choice. They can become politically savvy, transform, and move on from the life of fighting to a life of politics, where there will be, some accommodation for the form of governance they want. But if they really, keep on pushing the envelope, then I think, there will be sanctions, there will be a backlash. They might end up becoming the pariah that they were before 9/11 once again. Does the international community have a choice to reject Pakistan's discourse of duality? I think if you look at that side, how FATF, India, and the United States have shaped the discourse using the threat of sanctions, keeping Pakistan in the grey list, they have achieved a bit there on the Kashmir. So the Kashmir focused militant groups have been curtailed. So I think on that side as well, Pakistan has acknowledged and made amends as well. But then everyone has limitations, right? When the United States of America couldn't defeat the Afghan Taliban, I mean, Pakistan has limitations, right? So one has to get pragmatic and realistic to what extent you can do this, at what pace, and at what cost. You can dismantle the groups in a very hurried manner. It will involve a cost, a political, social, religious cost. Are you ready to pay that cost? Or do you want to do it in a gradual manner? So I think this is a work in progress. The war in Afghanistan is not over by any means. It is going in a different phase, and it would require a different approach then. In the meanwhile, everyone is trying to figure out what is going on. So I think that discourse of duality was a manifestation of Pakistan's limitations, number one. Number two, to protect Pakistan's own regional and strategic interests.
if you don't have any other options or a proxy, what would you do? And Pakistan, by the way, hasn't done anything outlandish here. Iran has done the same in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen. The Saudis, the Qataris, Emiratis, the Turks have done this. The Americans had their own good and bad Taliban in Syria, which is quote unquote the Kurds. Well, the Pakistanis have it, but you know what? We are a good punching bag for the West and the United States. When they want, they punch us hard, and they would like to scapegoat us for their own failures. I mean, your policy is changing every year. What do you expect Pakistan to do? In a year, you want them for accountability. Next, you want them for drones. Next, you want them for eradication of poppy. Next, you want them for talks. And when they are getting ready for talks, you say, oh, you know what, we are leaving. What do you expect Pakistan to do then? For America's own confusion, I think Pakistan shouldn't be blamed. That will be unfair. Well, Pakistan has done its own fair bit of damage and has paid a price as well. So yeah, to be fair to both sides.
Perfectly summed up, I guess. I think in a nutshell, Afghanistan remains, it's a disaster, mainly because of the policies that were undertaken by the United States and the regional countries particularly.
Unfortunately, the war in Afghanistan has more villains than heroes. If there are heroes, the heroes of the war are the hapless Afghan people who are yearning for peace, they're desperate for peace. So hope the peace returns to Afghanistan and hope somehow the negotiations work, the sanity prevails, international community feels the responsibility it owes to the people of Afghanistan, regional countries, particularly China, Pakistan, and Russia. They have the clout, they have the influence, they can, with America, can influence certain groups there. So let's hope for peace. But meanwhile, let's keep observing the situation as it unfolds.
So this marks the end of the session. Basit, thank you so much for providing such valuable insights. It was great to have you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Take care.